Hey guys, I got a question for you. Have you ever felt like you'd get better results if you could just find the right meal plan? You are not alone, and I can't tell you the number of times had someone ask, just tell me exactly what to eat and I'll do it. I get it, and I've been there. And if this sounds like you too, you are not alone. But today I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do instead. I understand the temptation to keep searching for the perfect meal plan, but the truth is that 98% of diets and meal plans fail. The majority of people who go on diets like meal plans wind up gaining back the weight that they lost and sometimes even more. Okay, so I'd like to explain two things to you now. Why I don't like to make meal plans for my clients and why meal plans never work and how they can actually move you backwards. So, the fact that meal plans tend to ignore some important realities about what, when, and how much you eat is the first thing that makes them not great. And then there's so much more to food than counting calories, tracking macros, or what exactly you put on your plate. There's personal preferences, there's resources and availability, and all of these things are going to vary depending on the person. Also, food isn't just fuel. It's social, it's celebratory, it's comforting, it's pleasurable, and it is an important part of many cultures. So, meal plans can cause a lot more harm than good for four big reasons. And those being that they don't take into account the importance of satisfaction in eating your meals or foods that you love, which is key for sustainability. Meal plans cause people to label foods and their behaviors around them as good or bad based on whether or not they're able to stick to the plan, which can be somewhat harmful for someone who has a history of dieting restriction or possibly struggles with a scarcity mindset around food. Meal plans can also cause food fear and fixations that can promote unhelpful on the wagon or off the wagon mindset. And this can lead to guilt or shame when you eat off plan. And also, meal plans can cause a lot of anxiety if the food that the meal plan calls for isn't available to you. So, by telling you what to eat, you'll never have the opportunity to really learn how to eat. So once you stop following your normal meal plan, you'll be just as confused as before you started it. Think about it. So you get a giant list of food, good and bad, right and wrong, on plan, off plan foods, and they leave you completely reliant on the plan to determine what to eat instead of teaching you to tune in to what your body really needs, which hinders your long term progress because they're not sustainable. This is where bio individuality comes in. And this is incredibly important to me because meal plans remove the most important part, and that's you. So I want to give you the tools to feel capable and confident in making your own choices. And the first step is listening to your body and what your body is trying to tell you. Most of us want to feel confident in our bodies and have a healthy relationship with food. We're sick of being restrictive or feeling out of control around food. We don't want to rely on someone else telling us what to eat day in and day out. We want to learn how to trust ourselves and feel in control of our choices. And you 100% deserve those things. All right. So if I don't recommend meal plans, then what do I recommend? So now I'm going to show you two skills that will change how you eat. And they are eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're satisfied. Sounds easy, right? They're a lot easier said than done. And many people find themselves constantly stuffed and feeling guilty after they eat because they either couldn't recognize that they were full or had anxiety around restricting a particular food and didn't want to stop eating because they were worried they wouldn't get that food again for a while. So you may think that you're already eating when you're hungry, but what most people don't realize is that there's a big difference between appetite and hunger, and they're often misunderstood. So, hunger is your physiological need. Hunger is the signal that we get from our body that tells us we need sustenance in the near future. It is the sensation you experience as that rumbling in your tummy. It might feel empty or hollow. That's hunger. So, some people also might feel low on energy or have trouble concentrating when they're hungry. Your appetite, on the other hand, that is a psychological want. Appetite is a desire from the mind that can be brought on by seeing or smelling food or by seeing other people eating. It's that little voice that convinces you to order dessert even though you're stuffed from dinner. So you hear people joke all the time about their dessert tank, which is basically a way of saying that there's always room for sweets regardless of how much they've eaten. That dessert tank is owned and operated by your appetite, not your hunger. To be clear, we all eat based on our appetite some of the time, and that's to be expected. Understanding what you're experiencing can be helpful in determining the choice that you'd like to make. So, if you know what you're experiencing, appetite or hunger, then you could acknowledge that and determine whether or not it's really worth it to have what your appetite wants. So, simply shifting your focus to start eating when you're hungry as opposed to eating based on appetite makes a huge difference. Okay, so learning to distinguish between our hunger and appetite can be tricky at first, and it can take some practice. But if you experience a sensation and you aren't sure if it's hunger or appetite, you can ask yourself some questions. So, some questions that you can ask is, am I hungry enough to eat some protein and veggies? If your answer is yes to that question, then likely you're hungry. Go ahead and eat. But if your answer is no, that protein and veggies would not satisfy you, then it's probably not hunger. It's probably just your appetite. Did you recently see or smell food that sounds appealing, or are you just bored or procrastinating maybe? Can you wait 15 minutes and then decide if it's really worth it? Another thing to watch for is to see if you typically experience appetite at the same time every day, such as when you're watching TV after dinner or while you're doing certain things like studying or working. Do you want to munch on a snack? If you notice a trend or a habit, you can work to disrupt this cycle. For example, you typically experience appetite while watching TV. Then, even though you just finished dinner, why don't you make yourself a cup of tea instead? Or can you move your dinner so that you're eating a bit later and then you don't have such a large window in between dinner and bedtime to snack? All right, so let's talk about how do you know when you're full? This is called your satiety signal, and it's a signal that you receive from your body telling you when you've had enough to eat. So many people consistently override the satiety signal without even realizing it until it's too late. We become immersed in our social media, our work, a TV show, and then it's really easy to go on autopilot during a meal. You're eating until everything is gone on your plate, regardless of how much food you actually need. So now more than ever, people rush through their meals, which also leads to overriding that satiety signal. We know that it takes at least 15 minutes for the signal to go from your stomach and reach your brain to tell us that we've had enough to eat. So bottom line here is that when we're rushing and distracted, we aren't being mindful of what we're eating. Then it's really easy to ignore the signal that says, hey, I've had enough. I realize everyone's busy, but take the time, sit down to eat your meals. Start by committing to just 2 or 3 meals a week. Think about what meals can you commit to sitting down for. Have you ever heard of a concept called Food in mouth, fork on plate. Really easy concept here. And this means that once you take a bite, you set your fork down and just stay present with the food until you're done chewing it and swallowing it. And then go for your next bite. But by setting the fork down between each bite, you're able to slow your overall pace and enjoy your food more without rushing. So consider taking that mid meal pause, halfway through your meal, set your fork down, take a few deep breaths, and check in and notice how you're feeling. Are you still hungry? And if not, save the leftovers. You don't need to finish them if you're not hungry. My last few tips for you are to just dish up smaller portions for yourself. When you go out to eat at a restaurant, make sure you ask for a box when you get your meal so that you can put half of it in the box and take it home with you. You don't need to eat all of it at one sitting, especially because when we go to restaurants, they always give you a huge serving size. So that will help you avoid overeating. You can always save the leftovers for later. It's important to get in touch with your satiety signal and heed that signal, whether you have 10 bites left on your plate or only 2 bites. Practice resisting the urge to finish something just because there's a little bit left. And just like identifying the difference between hunger and appetite can take some practice, so can eating until you're satisfied. So when you eat just until you're satisfied and not overfed, you should feel good and energized. So feeling sleepy, sluggish, or like you need to sit or lay down are a good indicator that you might have eaten too much. And a good way to determine if you've eaten until you're satisfied is to ask yourself if you could get up and immediately after a meal do 20 jumping jacks or take a brisk walk, then you have not eaten or overeaten. Remember, you want to feel good after your meals, not sick, stuffed, or weighted down. All right, guys, hope this helped.